Today we're going to go through the process of installing Google Maps using Carafe. The first step, if you don't have anything set up already, is to go to carafe.fm and download the FileMaker file. If you already have Carafe installed, you want to make sure that you've got at least version 3 or higher. If you have version 2 or older, make sure you go download version 3 or higher from carafe.fm. It ships with the new and improved Google Maps implementation, and so you can just simply search for Google. It will bring up the bundle. The bundle has a Google API key that is for development purposes only, which makes this thing show up. You'll be creating your own. You'll need to create your own Google API key, which will work properly. After we deploy this, I'll plug my API key in so you'll see it without this overlay. The steps we'll follow in this video will have only to do with setting it up in FileMaker and getting the data working for you. Before we get started on that process, I do want to flip over here and point out that this bundle, and ideally every bundle, will have an About section, which will have some important and useful instructions, which we will refer to. That also displays on the website. So if we go to carafe.fm and look for the Carafe bundle, the Google Maps bundle, I should say, we can see the same information that's displayed in FileMaker here, and this About tab is displayed on the web page as well. And assuming that you're dealing with the same version number, this could potentially be a little bit roomier section to work with, so you can read that a little more easily. For the purpose of our experiment here, we will be working with an existing solution that already has latitudes and longitudes in it, but that's really the only setup that it already has. So here's our data file. We'll go ahead and create a new layout. It'll be based on the same table that our data layout is based on. The only preparation you have to do in your target file is creating a web viewer. So in this case, we'll go ahead and put it, taking up that whole part of the screen, and just get rid of all this stuff. And we will name it with the default name that is configurable, but we'll just stick with the default as web, and we'll go ahead and allow that thing to be locked to all the sides. And in browse mode, we so far don't see anything. So the next step is we have to open up our script workspace, go over to Carafe, click on deploy, copy the script, bring it over to the script workspace, paste it in. Now, in theory, this script without any modifications will work. It has sample data in it, and it will target that web viewer, which is in the background. So it will basically do exactly what it does when it's in Carafe at this point. So this is where your first kind of integration tasks come in, and we'll talk about some best practices here. First thing I'd probably suggest is that you create a directory for the whole map integration. I'll just call it map integration. And within that, I'd probably want to put a directory for bundles. Probably usually only going to be one, but the bundle is a black box and you don't really want to modify that. We will reference it here, but generally speaking, you don't want to modify it. And what you should do is create yourself a loader script. Now, what this script will typically do is it will call the map loader and pass in a parameter. And you can see the deployed script already has this comment right here, which gives you some clue about, in fact, you can literally, it's there, it's generated by the deployer, deployment script. It can be literally used to set a parameter. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just paste that in. So here we're taking, we're creating a JSON object that's formatted as the script parameter suggests we need it to be formatted. It's still going to be our responsibility to fill in all these variables. So at this point, if we run this script, it's going to have empty variables for all that. It won't work at this point. So in order to populate those variables, you can come back over here and again, just kind of a labor-saving device, since all 5 of these are already set up. Instead of typing this all out, we can just copy these steps, which will be used inside the script, and put them, let's go ahead and put them before our set variable. And so now it's going to be a little bit easier for us to, one at a time, just replace this JSON get element as if it's coming in from the parameter, and put our own values in there from wherever our script context happens to be. And then we will actually do perform script, and that is going to be our bundle script, and that's going to take the parameter. So that's ready to run, and basically these 2 steps here are just plumbing. Basically this one sets it up in the right format and passes it along to this one. You could even put them together into one. So now it's our responsibility to figure out what to do with these. The first 5 of the 5 variables, one of them takes a little bit more work. The other 4 are basically just filling in some data. So file name and script name, these 2 are needed by the click handler inside the script. So it basically needs to call this file, so we can just use the expression that'll satisfy that. And then as far as the script we want to call, we haven't created that script yet, but we'll just go ahead and make up a script. And we'll call this marker map marker click handler. And we'll actually, I'll just go ahead and copy this on the clipboard right now because we have it. Go ahead and make a blank script by that name. So we will have script name and file name configured properly. So we'll just go new script, map marker click handler, and we'll come back and play with that later. So on the map loader, there's 2 other aspects of this which will be hard-coded right here in the script configuration. For the time being, I think I'm just going to go ahead and use the same one that's shipped as sample data in the script. So this is the one that's already public, and then when I don't need to show this anymore, I can plug in my one secretly so that you guys don't see it. And then as far as the minimum cluster size, that's also a configuration setting that you can have. We're just going to go with 2, and that'll become clear in a little while. I'm not even sure that's really necessary to be an exposed configuration. It was something I thought might be useful, and I'll show what it's for when we get to that. Now, the real trick is, well, how do you create the map data? So I mentioned going back to the website is a convenient way to read the about stuff. And in this one, it does have some explanation about how you're supposed to build the map data. So basically, the map is an array containing a bunch of objects that look something like this. This is an example of an object. This right here is actually a FileMaker expression, which will turn, if you have a table called asset and you have a bunch of fields that will, this is giving an example of a FileMaker expression which would resolve to your data. And the suggestion that I've included here is to have your map loader do a loop over a found set. In our script, we've already got this, got these various things filled out, and we're going to go ahead and concentrate on this loop portion of it. And there's just a little sanity check here that makes sure you're in the right context, so it just doesn't run and cause some unexpected behavior. Just to make our life a little easier here, we'll go into define database, and we'll change this to asset so that our some of our stuff will be a little more literal. Okay, so first thing we do is check context, right? So we'll go layout table context. Name is not asset. We're just going to exit the script, and we can say wrong context. It doesn't really matter. It depends how your error handling is set up or whatever. So assuming it is the right context, we are going to switch to the layout, to really any layout. But my recommendation when you're dealing with web viewers that are in the context of your data is you go somewhere else to do your data loading or looping or whatever, because you don't want to, in some cases, you'll end up with the web viewer continuing to try to load as you're looping over records. So let's just go ahead and create a new layout in our solution that's similar to the web viewer layout, but doesn't have a web viewer on it. So I'm just going to duplicate our layout and call it map loader. It's also going to be in the same, it's going to be based on the same context as our other UI components. So if we had a list view based on asset, we'd be able to just change layouts to either of these and maintain the same found set, which means that you don't have to worry about extra fines and stuff like that. So we'll just call this map loader, switch to the map loader, but we'll get rid of the map, and we'll just put some text on here, loading, and we'll just go ahead and let that free float in the middle. And so now in our script, we can go to layout, and we'll just go to our loader layout. And then once we eventually, before we get to this perform script right at the very end, we'll go to layout, and we'll switch back to the map. And then we'll set our parameter. In fact, this logically can go right there, right before we pass the parameter in. So now our one remaining trick is to create this iterator. So we loop over the found set, and we load up our parameters. So here in the about text, which you can look at on the website, it's also other places. If you scroll down, you'll see the FileMaker expression for mapping a bunch of fields or a bunch of anything you want to a marker object. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and switch back to FileMaker. Now we are going to need to create an iterator, but before we do that, we can set our variable in here, which we'll then have to set inside our iterator. And we'll just go ahead and go in the expression editor, get rid of these extra spaces. So here we have a marker getting loaded up with ID, position, latitude and longitude, title, label, and color. So because we've named our table asset, and this is sort of the demo that I pulled it from, we already have a couple of these field mappings working correctly, but some of them are simplified to make them more self-explanatory, and that is not their literal name. So we'll fix some of these before we click OK. And the title is, there's not an actual field called title. We're going to use the asset named, and then without the title becomes a tooltip. The label is basically like a category. So we have a field in here for type. And the color, you can set any hexadecimal color in there. I don't have a field in here yet, but I will go ahead and use this field name. So instead of doing an expression, a sub expression here, or like a case statement in here, I am going to create a new field, which is going to be a stored calculation. Create. And this is going to be a case statement based on, get rid of these things, based on the type. So our first test is going to be if the type field, the type field sometimes can be more than one word. So let's go left words type for one is commercial in this case. Again, you can, this is your logic, right? So then we have to put a hexadecimal or a web safe color here. In this case, believe it or not, in CSS, a lot of the primary colors are valid for those. So I'm actually just going to write red there, then rather than try and pick a hexadecimal color out of the air. And then I'll just go in and basically copy this line for the rest of my conditions. And then we'll have the default be gray. So if left words on type is land, I think is one, and residential, we can make land be green and residential be blue. Or maybe we'll make commercial be yellow, actually. And then, so, you know, again, these can be hexadecimal. By hexadecimal, I mean you can write the hash sign and then either like 3 or 6 characters, depending on, you know, what you're trying to express. But I'm going to stick with the words. So now we have that hex color field. And so this expression should now evaluate. This is going to be called marker. And looking back at our loop, we've already established context that, you know, we have some kind of, we're in an asset context. So this can be a simple loop. Basically have an iterator and start out with an empty markers plural array and start with the first record. So set variable I and set variable markers as just an empty array, just kind of coerces a type, and make this a little smaller so we can do it at the same time. We will go to the first record first, and we're going to loop, and we're going to do the last, next, exit after last on. And then rather than, in this example, we have a perform script where we have our marker already defined here. So we just have to do set variable marker. And this little expression right here is really going to be up to you, or up to your use case. I will go ahead and do this. Basically, if you end up with, since we cast the positions to numbers, anything that's not a valid lat long will become 0, and then you'll end up with like anything that doesn't have valid values in like the middle of the ocean or something. So we'll go if, and we'll use that expression position.lat is not 0 and long is not 0. Now we're cool. So now we'll just basically set, and then we also have to set our iterator inside here to itself plus 1. And then as far as the marker itself goes, we can just use this adjacent set element expression. This is why we are running the iterator, because we need because there's no push function or whatever on in FileMaker, so we have to explicitly set the array address. So we just count up from 0. So we're not going to do get script result. We're going to just do marker, and that will be a JSON object. So we're setting the markers array at the I address with the marker object. This is what we need to set markers as map data markers. This one here is still left over from our original paste in here. So markers, map data is set to markers. Now we have our 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, make that, which get assigned into this parameter. In theory, this should work. So I am just going to go for it. Booyah. So the only thing is, in order to show it without this development purposes only, I'm going to move the script editor over here and sneak in my valid value so it doesn't show up in the video. Save. Now I'm going to run the script again. And we just get it without the watermark thing over it. So the way this works, if I tooltip, the way the bundle is set up, if I tooltip over one of these marker clusters, if you recall, we set up the colors and the labels, and you can see this one where there's a single, it says land because that's the type, and it's got the land color. But if I zoom in here till I get to an area where they're far enough apart, let's see if I can get any closer. There's an other. Okay, there's a couple commercials. They're yellow. Maybe the yellow doesn't come out so good. Okay, I just put the old one, so it still kind of looks the same. I commented it out, put the one that's public visible here so that I can bring this back over on the screen. And now we can go back into our calc field that we created and change that from yellow to red, because it'll maybe look a little better with the white stroke on the pin. So now map loader, and see if we can find a commercial one. Yeah, so the commercial real estate right there. you see I did get a FMP URL when I clicked on that. So let's finish this up with wiring up the click handler. So the first thing is this brand new data file that I created, and so it needs the extended privilege for FMP URL. So FMP URL script, we'll just go ahead and we're in full access. I'll let them run for all these. Say okay, allow, and in scripts, remember we have a click handler right here. I'm just going to, for the purpose of illustration, I'm going to do custom dialog test, and we'll just put in get script parameter. Basically what this will do is, all that we're going to do here is open a custom dialog and show that you could do whatever you want with that ID. So there's our script running, 423. That's the one we clicked on over there, 392. So as you can see, you could make this into a card window with a popover that shows a detail or anything you want to do with that click event. So let's take a look at our script editor, take a look and see if there's anything I overlooked or that I want to reinforce before we wrap this up. The point here is this is a recipe. It is not the only way that you could do this. All bundles take JSON in, and so you just need to be able to build up your data into a JSON structure. You need to be able to understand a JSON structure. You need to get comfortable with the JSON functions and mentally mapping in your mind the difference between what kind of like raw JSON is. Like this is a raw JSON object expressed in text, but you know something that had a JSON scalar types would understand this as JSON, and whereas this is a FileMaker expression, with FileMaker being all string scalar types. If you just wrote JSON in it, it would try to evaluate this, which is why all of the bits and pieces of the things that we use to set and manipulate JSON and stuff are statements or part of an expression. So I do like this syntax. I think you'll see this in other places as well, but this is pretty much a de facto standard for me, where the reason I like this syntax is it allows you to just move these lines up and down or interchange them. This becomes the order becomes less tied to the formatting. You can as long as you formatted a single line within your set element this way, you can copy and paste them in and swap them around and not have to be juggling semicolons all the time and square brackets. These links are provided also in the FileMaker file. You will see the same links at the bottom of the reference section here. Follow the Get API key to get your own. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments.